Welcome to another live edition of Deep Look. It's Ultiworld's weekly podcast about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld's senior editor, Keith Raynor, on this Tuesday, May 6th, following the Knicks' victory over the Boston Celtics in Game 1 of Round 2 of the NBA playoffs. My gosh, I could not go to sleep last night. I was so fired up, Keith.
The Celtics offense just absolutely abandoning them down the stretch as all they could do was have Jason Tatum step back three after matchup hunting. I don't know how he couldn't get to the basket against either Cat or Brunson in isolation, but Mikal Bridges played like 700 minutes in his 8 millionth consecutive basketball game. If I play pickup basketball for a half hour, I feel like I'm going to die. How does he play? It's like 60 straight minutes of NBA basketball? Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. He's an absolute warrior, and all these guys are. I mean, they're built for this, Keith. I was screaming that at the bar last night. That the Knicks all season we had to play these crazy minute games, and so we are ready for this moment. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point, but an incredible win, one of the best wins.
Start criticizing Thibodeau.
One of the best wins of the last 10 years for the Knicks. Beautiful stuff. Lots to get to. We've got a full college nationals field following regionals weekend number 2. So we are getting ready for the biggest tournament of the year in the college division and cannot wait. We are just a little over a week and a half away from Division 3 nationals starting May 17th. And then we're 2.5 weeks away from the start of D1 on May 23rd. We're going to get into all of that college national stuff. We're going to talk top 25 players today. But first, as always, we've got our trivia question of the week.
Charlie, fitting of our post-regionals podcast, I want to hit you with a regionals question. So this is going to be different. I don't think we've done this before. I want you to order these 3 things. Regions that have been won by the same team for 4+ consecutive years running, for 2 to 3 years consecutively, or have a non-repeating champion this year. So you got there's 3 buckets. Which one do you think has the highest total, and which one do you think has the bottom total?
Oh, I see. So I'm categorizing all 10 regions into these buckets.
No, just total. Just the total. How many regions? Which of these do you think has the most total regions represented?
Understood. I'm out of 20 basically because of
you don't have to give it. They're 20. I'm going to count Colorado, Mama Bird as winning the South Central this year. So do with that information what you will.
That's fair.
But think about how you want to order those 3. So it's 4+ of the same team winning consecutively, 2 to 3 years of the same team winning consecutively,
or a brand new winner,
a champion who did not win last year. So think about that. I'll tell everybody about our friends over at Breakmark. It's their 20th anniversary. They're on a 20-year streak over there. They're celebrating by doing giveaways on Instagram every Friday. They run until Tuesday. So last week's giveaway is still going on. And I got that extended just for you, listeners. So you go and enter our exclusive code to get double the entries for the free giveaway. Last week, I think it was flamingo bandanas. So if you're looking to get a flamingo bandana, you look good in pink like I do, go ahead and go over there. Drop the promo code. It's exclusive to the episode. It's top 25 this week, all one word. Just put top 25 in on your entry. You'll get double the chances to win. So everybody else is going to be sitting over there with just one little ticket, hoping they win. You're going to get 2. That's exclusive with Deep Look. You can enter that at Breakmark on Instagram, and that's Breakmark, the official jersey provider for the Western Ultimate League and Premier Ultimate League. All right, Charlie, what's your order?
I'm going to say for Dynasty, 10 repeat and 6 new.
So you think repeat is the largest bucket, that
Yes.
dynasty is the smallest bucket, and that new is in the middle. That's where you're
Uh,
going.
yes.
All right, lock in your answers out there, folks. Uh, you've got it flipped around, my friend. Dynasty is by far the large. I guess not by far, but is definitely the clear winner here. Regions won by the same team for 4+ years. There are 9 such regions of the 20 across the 2 divisions in D1. There are 6 such regions with new champions this year, non-repeat champions, and 5 that have 2 to 3. I was a bit
Okay.
stunned when I looked through. I think I would have probably come in with the same impression as you, but some of these teams have just been running their regions year after year after year after year. It's a new maybe we're hitting a new precipice. You know, like the New England men's finally knocked off Brown after years of them being in charge of the region. So maybe there's a sea of change coming, but so far it has really been regional dynasties, teams just dominating the region over and over again. Colorado in both women's and men's divisions, Cal Poly Slow in the men's division, Oregon in the men's division, UNC in both divisions, Michigan in both divisions. We've seen the same teams
Yeah, I guess
winning
so.
over and over again.
I I felt like 4 years was a high bar, but then I actually think about it and it's like, were you counting 2021 for what it's worth? I guess you
Yeah,
probably were.
yeah, I left it all in.
Yeah, I guess it's just not that long. If you go back to 2019, I bet it changes a bunch, right? If you made the bar 5, but yeah, I'm not shocked. Um, but I definitely didn't think it was quite so dominant for the long time winners. Because I was thinking about teams that have like been dominant but then lost, like Pitt, men,
Mhm.
and I guess for a while, like Colorado men, I think have won since 2021, but they did miss nationals at some point. Was that in
They no,
2018 or 19?
they hit the streak. They're in the 4+ bucket. They get the dynasty
Yeah, so
bonus.
that's what I'm saying. I was thinking that they had lost that one year they didn't go to nationals, but that was now more than 4 years ago.
We
Interesting.
got we got
All
a lot
right.
of qualifiers though this year, and some new ones, some new regional champions to talk about.
Well, let's talk about some of those regional champions as we take a look at our Division 3 national qualifiers. The women's division was already all settled after the previous weekend, but this weekend settled things up in the men's division. You will see Hillsdale now on the chart in D3 men's. We'll talk about that in just a second, but that is your full list. Elon, Richmond, Davenport, Hillsdale, Wesleyan, Rochester, Middlebury, Bowdoin, Carleton, Whitman, Lewis and Clark, Franciscan, Oklahoma Christian, Missouri S&T, Barry, and Claremont in D3 men's. And the women's side, we already know Richmond, Davenport, Wesleyan, Rochester, Middlebury, Mount Holyoke, St. Olaf, Carleton, Whitman, Puget Sound, Lewis and Clark, Haverford, Bryn Mawr, Kenyon, Rice, Union, and Claremont. Keith, Hillsdale has been permitted to compete. They will have both of their captains and their coach uh, suspended for a game. I think 2 games is the ultimate decision from USA Ultimate. So TBD on which games those will be, but a pretty steep penalty to lose your captains and your coach.
But a lot less steep than getting DQ'd.
It's
I mean,
true.
this was the middle ground option. I thought it was only slightly less likely that they do this than that they just straight up DQ them. So I think this is the outcome we kind of both were saying is the best is the right choice. Something in between. Yes, they messed up. They violated the rules. Whether or not you think the rules should be that is a different question altogether. They violated the rules. Deserve to get punished. But an outright ban from nationals for this season probably felt a little extreme given the circumstances. So I think this is a good middle ground.
Let's take a look at the D1 qualifiers. We had the Northwest Regional this weekend. We're going to talk about regionals in just a second. On the women's side, UNC, Michigan, Cornell, Tufts, Vermont, Carleton, UBC, Washington, Oregon, Utah, UVic, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Georgia, UCSB, Stanford, Cal Poly, UC San Diego, UC Santa Cruz, and UC Davis. On the men's side, it's UNC, Michigan, Ottawa, Massachusetts, Northeastern Vermont. That's the trio that made it out of the New England this weekend. Carleton, Oregon, Oregon State, Utah, Western Washington, British Columbia. Yeah, no Washington, Keith. Penn State, Colorado, Wash U, Texas, Georgia, Cal Poly, Santa Cruz, and Cal.
Yeah, you hit me with that. You hit me with that Utah. I got some flack for fading the state. They're a prideful state, and Utah delivered for the first time all season, but the right time. Right, they came through in the clutch. That's what matters. And finishing third in a strong region goes to show the type of ceiling that the team has. But interesting field. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about your projected seedings because there's some contested points here, but not a ton of shocks this year.
No, for the most part, the strong teams during the season got through regionals clean. It feels like we've had some years where it's been totally wild chaos, and then more recently, it feels like we've had more stability at regionals for whatever reason. Let's talk about college regionals week 2, and then we'll get into the seeding stuff. So, New England men's, we can just quickly touch on that. Ultimately, we got UMass taking care of business, but it was a tight game with Northeastern in that final. Vermont gets through at the end over Tufts. Brown gets knocked out without even reaching the game to go. What do you make of Brown after winning the title in 2024, not making it back here in 2025?
Well, they're just following the trend. 3 out of 4 title winners from last year across the 4 quadrants, not making it back this year. So I guess they just didn't want to be too different from anybody else. But we talked about this in our subscriber only pod reacting over the weekend. But this Brown team kind of finished how we expected that, but we knew that they would be right around the cutoff line, and it still feels that way. I mean, they were good enough to have advanced, but they got outplayed, and the deficit in talent just couldn't be overcome by the systems that they had in place.
Yeah, I really thought that they would get the job done, but maybe being the champions of the 9th place bracket at every tournament this season wasn't enough to have the punch to do the winning in the championship and game to go brackets. Just never quite had the horses, and I think that they kind of did well to even be up in the conversation, considering the talent in the region. Ultimately, Vermont does get through. They've definitely looked shaky at points this season, but held off a good Tufts team. And how good is Northeastern, Keith? I mean, should we be like squinting a little bit at their chances of maybe making a little bit of a bracket run at nationals?
I would. They would not be a lower seeded team that I would want to draw because they've shown some ceiling that isn't typical for teams that are hovering around that 10 to 20 mark in our power rankings. This is a team that beat Colorado earlier in the year, ran step for step with Oregon, but they also struggled. They struggled at Smoky Mountain, had an up and down season altogether, but they had a good weekend at regionals. I think this is a scary team because they've shown the capability to play up in a way that some other teams that are going to be seated around them have not.
Yeah, a team you're not going to want to see in your pool. Let's talk Northwest. We can start on the women's side. The qualifiers: UBC, Washington, Oregon, Utah, UVic. No huge surprises here. Perhaps Washington, one of the biggest surprises, because they really pushed UBC in that final.
They did, and I think UBC was really going for it. I don't think they kind of phoned it in because they had already qualified. I think Washington just played really well at regionals, and that's something that they are kind of introducing to the system. We talked about how Northeastern stacks up in the men's division, but Washington in the women's division showing some of that ceiling. They have a pretty talented and experienced group, even if they don't have like a lot of the top end talent that you might think of as coming out. But they got U24 players with elite club experience. They have strong rookies this year. They could be turning the corner at the right time.
I forgot. I want to go back to this really quick. New England men's. Vermont lost to Brown in pool play on Saturday, then lost to Tufts later in the day in crossovers, and then beat Brown and Tufts to qualify for nationals on Sunday. I mean, that's what the margins were in this region.
It's tough. I mean, we knew that these bid heavy New England and Northwest regions were going to present challenges down the board because that 3 to 5, 6 group was going to be pretty well matched against each other, and I think that played out in all three circumstances. Whether you're looking at the Northwest women's and you're looking at the close matchups between Western Washington and UVic and Utah, or whether you're looking at the Northwest men's and you're looking at UBC and UVic and Utah Valley, I think we got what we came for because it was hard to even suss out which of those teams to pick when it came down to it, and those teams delivered when it came to the point of trying to play your most competitive ultimate. They really showed that there was a deep group there and backed up what we had to say about them.
Yep. On the men's side, Oregon and Oregon State, clearly the class of the region. Oregon gets a 15-11 win in the final. Oregon State crushed UBC 15-9 in semis to get their bid. Oregon beat Washington 15-12 in semis to get their bid. And then it was just free fall for Washington from there. They drop a game 15-13 to Western Washington. That sends them down into the backdoor bracket where they then get obliterated by UVic 15-7. And that was it for the Washington Sun Dodgers. Meanwhile, Utah gets a 14-13 win over Western after beating UBC. So Utah, they are coming in as a 9 seed into regionals, and they put together their best tournament of the season. Ended up losing to Oregon State 15-13 in the second place game.
They came on strong. I mean, I caught some flack. Somebody said it was crazy for me to fade the whole state of Utah in the picks, and I was like, was it? In what sense is saying the 7, 8, and 9 seed are all not going to make nationals that weird? But Utah, I D crow on that, and I don't feel bad about the choice. Like, I think if I went back, I'd still probably pick it because of the way they performed during the regular season. Just didn't inspire a lot of confidence, even with the talented names on the roster. But they played up. Right? They did not have an easy run through nationals. Every team they played was a team that was in the conversation to make nationals or eventually did make nationals. And they beat Western Washington and UBC, and they gave Oregon State a solid game. They beat UVic. They beat Utah State. Like, they passed the test. This was not a beat the non-nationals teams and get in at the back door or win one game or whatever off a team coming off a loss. They did it the hard way.
Yep. They didn't even have to put themselves into the game to go bracket. In that game to go bracket, some controversy. UBC comes away the 5th place team. I should note that Western had already qualified for nationals when they beat Washington. Just that's the way things fall in these mega bid regions. So Western lost to Utah in the 2nd place finals bracket semi to finish 4th. UBC gets the 5th bid. They go 14-13 win over Utah Valley, 12-11 win over UVic. And Keith, there has been a lot of conversation, primarily in the Ultra World Discord. I've seen a little bit on Reddit as well about the spirit level from UBC and complaints about the calls, ticky-tack stuff, travel calls, and now like a growing chorus of people talking about that this is how they are as a program. What did you see on tape from UBC, and do you feel like there needs to be more done than just have observers on their games?
I watched some of their last 2 games in the bracket, the ending of their UVic game and some of their Utah Valley game. And, I saw some ticky-tack calls. I saw some extended conversations. It's a little tough to tell, really what was going on, or even sometimes what the call or the resolution was, like what the conversation sounded like. What was the claim of the person who was contesting the call? And that makes it tough to judge. There's a travel call going around in our Discord that was clearly a bad travel call, and I think people have kind of glommed onto that. But there were some fouls the other way, and I saw lots of calls, especially as games became tight. I've been complaining about this. I will continue to do so. It stinks how people call games down the stretch. In what should be the most exciting moments of the game, everybody suddenly calls every ticky tack thing that they possibly can and argues every call as well. And sometimes just it feels like intentionally is slowing the game down. It does make for some anticlimactic endings. Even more than what I saw on tape is the concern of the chorus of anti-UBC sentiment. This is something that people were saying months ago, that there were comments like, if you play UBC, get observers. Like this is apparently something teams all around the region or all around the West Coast know, and that's a problem. And yes, sometimes the reputation of a team can be kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. People are looking out for your worst. They're already on the defensive when you get there. I get that, but that reputation comes from somewhere. And I don't think it's just, the Team Canada representatives from the Hungary game, or what the 15, 20 years ago that it was Japan and Canada. Like, I don't think it's just that stuff. There's something going on here. This is where there's smoke, there's fire situation, in my opinion.
British Columbia as a province, not the greatest rep when it comes to playing with spirit. Max Charles in the comments on YouTube says, Florida of Canada, many are saying. Look, knock it off. It sucks. Like, and some of the best players on that team are part of the problem. Justin Podnar is a part of the problem. He's been a problem on his club teams. He's been a problem on the Canadian national teams. He just does not play with great spirit. It's a fact. He's a fantastic player. But I'd like to see some growth from this team, and they can show up at nationals and just simply do better on this front. And hopefully some of the conversation around what happened in regionals will give them an opportunity to look inward. But it shouldn't go unpunished. And I think observers need to be ready to be on those games for UBC.
You don't want to be a team getting singled out, but you also like the community policing aspect. You don't want to get to the point where like people are throwing stones, so to speak, but they have time to like make this a focal point, and they know there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on them at nationals. To be fair, people were like, they can't win if they play with observers, and they did. They went out of one with observers there. So I believe in the talent of the team, and I haven't actually seen a lot of people questioning that. It really is just like, feels like they're willing to bend the rules when it comes down to the end of the game. And I would love to see them come out of nationals and prove people wrong and show like, hey, we turned over a new leaf. There's a level of accountability here. That's how it should work. I tell my own players, it's not about not making mistakes. It's about responding well to them and learning from them. So I hope that we can afford them the grace to do that, but they got to deliver on it. If they show up at nationals and the cameras are catching them, there's going to be observers and cameras everywhere. Like, you're not going to be able to hide it if you're playing that way, and teams are going to talk about it. So just don't be that team.
Don't be that team. Just don't be that team. Seriously. All right. Well, let's talk about possible seedings for nationals. Now, this is all a little bit hypothetical. I do this exercise every year. I wanted to get them out the door right away. I decided to do that with Frisbee rankings approximations. They've been very accurate this year. I expect that if there are issues in terms of the relative orders of teams, that they won't be far off. Why don't we start in D1 men's? And here is what I have for projected seedings. These are not the official seedings from USAU. We're probably not going to have those until next week. But based on Frisbee rankings and a couple of key adjustments, this is the pools that I came up with. Keith, the big question in the men's division is what is going to happen with these top 5 teams. It has never been less clear how to order the 1 seeds at college nationals. Colorado, UNC, UMass, Oregon, Carleton is the order that I have them in. But there's a case for most of these teams to have a 1 seed. Oregon is the top ranked team. UMass is number 2, but beat Oregon heads up. UNC is 1-0 against UMass. Colorado has beaten UMass and split with UNC. So, you can go dig into the numbers yourselves. Do you like how I assessed these 1 to 5? Well, Keith, I see you need to take a quick step away. That's fine. I'll keep talking. You go. I don't know what's going on with Keith right now, but it's you and me, folks. Ultimately, I decided that Colorado's win at Easterns was the critical tiebreaker here, as the end of the season, the most competitive tournament of the season. They get the win over UNC with UNC at full strength. You have to have something to go off of to kind of pick an order for these teams. So Colorado gets the 1 seed. UNC with the heads-up win over UMass, I gave the 2 spot. UMass has the heads-up win over Oregon, so I gave them the 3 spot. Carleton, to me, felt like clearly the bottom of the 5. But I expect them to be in Pool D either way, 4 or 5. It doesn't really matter too much. And then you've got Cal Poly as a clear number 6. They were well above the rest of the field, but noticeably below those top 5 in terms of results and algorithm. So that's how it all kind of shakes out. I made a couple of small changes at the margins. Northeastern landing in Pool B kind of helps keep the rematches of regionals a little bit cleaner. And so that's what we've got for the men's division. We'll come back and I'll have Keith react to it. But while he's stepping away, let's go ahead and look at the women's division. As he returns perfectly right now. We'll stay here. Keith, welcome back. Your thoughts on my projections here in the men's division?
Well, I have to at least say before we jump further in, there are a few places I give Charlie more credit for than here, which he is generally pretty accurate in breaking these down. So I'm going to hedge towards what Charlie has typically done. Now, you're right that there's a pretty difficult mix here because I'd say in most years we've seen USA Ultimate hew towards the rankings. They're going to kind of say everything's already baked in, so we don't want to make a lot of adjustments. But right now we're seeing teams ranked very closely together. Their total points in the algorithm are pretty similar and a lot of head-to-head matchups between them. So last year it felt like we saw a few more adjustments for head-to-heads than we had in the past. I don't know whether or not to expect that to be a trend, but it is something to take note of as you're starting to make some of these moves. I mean, to have a team like Colorado that is ranked below a number of the teams behind them, boosted all the way up to the 1 seed, that's unusual, I would say, right? You don't usually bump teams. Oregon at 4 when they're the number 1 ranked team, it's pretty uncommon, but you do have a lot of those head-to-heads to draw on. So I think that you're probably getting close to the right spot. Oregon, it does feel like Oregon at 4. I don't know. The number 1 ranked team falling all the way to 4 feels a little hard for me to see, but it's like,
hear me out.
How do you put them above UMass?
You can't put them above UMass, I don't think. And tell me that their results stand up to an overall picture of the season. They didn't win any big tournaments. I mean, Pres Day, right? But when they went out east, they didn't win those tournaments. They looked noticeably below those top 3 teams by the eye test. I think team feedback is going to be similar. Now, you're right, Keith. It is unusual for a number 1 ranked team to fall all the way down to a 4 spot. But it just feels like the right result when you actually sit down and you look at all the data.
Well, the place where I could see USA Ultimate going against you there is that they rely on the algorithm because they think that that's a fair way to evaluate the way teams played. They're not going to care. It doesn't matter how prestigious a tournament is or how good the big name teams they played are. If they beat Oregon State by a lot, the algorithm's going to count that for more than maybe we personally would
I
when
understand that.
comparing that to like beating another top ranked team by one. That's
Listen,
supposed to be baked in.
the problem with the algorithm is that it assigns an equal weight to all games. And it's just
Yes.
not the case that a third or fifth place consolation game should carry the same weight as a tournament final. And that's where I feel like Oregon's number one ranking is a little bit fraudulent. It's like not accounting for the fact that, maybe they're running up the score on more lesser teams, or they're winning in consolation. Like, listen, they're still really good. They're gonna get a pool one seed one way or the other. But ultimately they split with UNC, they split with Colorado, they split with a Carleton team that I think is a little bit worse than the rest of these top four, and they're 0-1 against UMass. So I just don't really think when you look at the way that their season played out, they looked like the worst of those four teams. Like if you're
Yeah,
going to put
I'll be
odds
curious how
on
this
a
shakes out. I mean,
Nationals win, I think they would have the fourth odds on this list, right? It would be behind those three teams.
I don't disagree with that, but I have trouble seeing USAU looking at that type of logic. That's the type of logic that they tend to avoid. So they're also, I don't think, the type to split the baby here. I think they're going to pick a philosophy and go with it, and either they're going to go towards the rankings or they're going to look more at head-to-heads. And maybe I could see them doing the rankings and having one switch. But otherwise, I think they're going to go one way or the other. And you've gone all the way, I think, towards let's like qualitatively evaluate these teams.
And that's because they were so close together in the rankings and the resumes were so mixed. A lot of them have wins and losses against the others, that it didn't make sense to just sort of like blindly rely on the algorithm. I mean, you could also make the case that you should just blindly rely on the algorithm and say, well, whatever, that captures it. But I don't know. I want to reward teams for winning tournaments, and I think that's explicitly in USAU seeding guidelines. So we'll see what happens. I won't be shocked by almost any ordering of these top five, but it would feel wrong to me if Oregon ends up getting the one seed just because they're number one ranked.
Well, there is one element that we haven't talked about, and I think could be maybe the missing piece here, and it's something that we don't hear about because it's done without transparency, logically so, and that's team feedback.
Right.
That could help you arrive at this type of the type of middle ground that I think USA Ultimate would avoid, where Oregon teams are giving feedback and saying we don't think Oregon should be the number one seed, and that kind of gives that gives USAU the permission to make the changes without feeling like they are deciding that for themselves. I think ultimately they want to preserve the idea that they are not doing a selection committee sort of situation, that they are not subjectively deciding where teams should be, and they want to absolve themselves of that responsibility because they don't want any accusations of impropriety. So
Here,
I think that where they have that plausible deniability, they'll take it, and team feedback could be where that comes from.
yeah, I agree. I completely agree. My last thought here is Colorado owns the head-to-head over UMass. UNC owns the head-to-head over UMass. UMass owns the head-to-head over Oregon. That's kind of how I ended up where I did.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the most clear, like sort of way to do this delineation. And to be clear, I'm trying to predict what USAU is going to do. This isn't necessarily like what I think, although to some extent, ordering these top five teams had to be a little bit of like, what would I think teams will say? What feels like the right thing to do? Because you can't just kind of rely on the algorithm in this case. Most of the rest of these rankings are just straight rankings. Let's go to the women's division. It was a little bit more straightforward, I would say, in the women's division, but not entirely. I've got number one ranked UBC, number one overall. The undefeated Tufts, with their head-to-head win over Carleton, bumps up from their 3 spot in the rankings to the 2 seed. Then Carleton, Colorado, Vermont, Washington, Oregon, and then I had to start making some finger on the scale decisions because of the density of Southwest teams in a like chunk of the rankings. If you just go kind of like straight rankings, you end up with 3 Pool A Southwest teams. I think it was Santa Barbara, SLO, and UCSD. And it just felt like even though they're not trying to explicitly avoid regional rematches, you don't want to have to put 3 teams from a region in a pool together. And bumping UNC up past UCSB uh, accomplished a lot. It moved a Southwest team to Pool D, giving UNC a nudge because they're the 4X national champions. Seems very reasonable, and it just sort of like balances out everything way better. I also moved UCSB up a bunch relative to their ranking because I feel like their regionals win needs to carry more weight than just sort of like a normal minor upset at regionals. This actually gives us a pecking order in the Southwest that we should probably carry through into nationals because it was so murky this season amongst those teams. So, Keith, your thoughts?
I want to see where UCSB is actually ranked to get a better sense. So
I get happy to tell
in
you.
the projected rankings, they're 13th overall, which
Yeah,
puts them
behind
behind
SLO,
behind UC San
Michigan,
Diego,
UCSD, and North Carolina.
and regional finish is non-binding here, but it is specifically called out as being something that they're going to value in the seating. Correct?
Yes, yes. It's
It
heavily
is a big
considered,
bump.
I think is the word. Yeah,
The
but
other
look
problem
who I'm
is
bumping them look who I'm bumping them past, right? I'm
yeah.
bringing them over SLO, UCSD, and Stanford, okay? They beat those teams at regionals. And then I'm bumping them ahead of Michigan. And, like, part of that is balance of these regional matchups, but also, like, UCSB winning the Southwest feels like it carries some weight in the way that Michigan winning the Great Lakes just does not. And you can look and see if I keep Michigan higher, look what happens, right? Stanford, Santa Cruz, Davis all together
Mhm.
in a pool. So I am making like a somewhat qualitative decision to avoid a triple Southwest pool, which I think USAU will do because it's just not, there's no reason to do it when you can adjust like this and have like still perfectly reasonable pools. The same teams get a 3 seed, and you end up with teams not having to play 2 regional rematches.
I totally agree that they're going to try and avoid 3 Southwest teams, and you've kind of gotten to one of the points, which is like it's hard to do that moving the other teams around. Uh, you know, you could flip SLO in Michigan, but that doesn't help your problem.
Right.
Davis and Georgia are pretty far apart in the rankings, so I think they would be reticent to flip those teams. If you try and flip Davis and Penn, you still have the same problem. So you're right that like this is one of the few ways to actually relieve some of that Southwest pressure in the same place.
Penn has a head to head over Davis, so it just feels like completely unacceptable to put them below them. And then I went through exactly the same calculus, Keith. It's like Davis is over 150 points clear of Georgia. They clearly are a better team. So it just doesn't feel right to move them down. This feels less arbitrary. Like the changes that I've made, it's like, okay, well, Santa Barbara gets the top Southwest slot and they get to go ahead of Michigan because it balances the pools right.
We'll see. I mean, there's some chance I guess we could see a 3-team Southwest. Especially when you have so many teams, USA Ultimate might just throw their hands up in the air and be like, "Oh well, that's they've been playing the same teams all year anyway. They get the regular season, they don't seem to have a problem with it, so why should they at nationals?" But yeah, I agree with where you're at. I think this is what I would prefer, and I think it's probably more likely, but it certainly is not a lock in my
No,
mind.
no. Let's go to the D3 men's division. D3 in general is a little bit easier. There's less crossover between teams competitively, and a lot of times the rankings match up very closely to the head-to-heads. So you don't have to make a ton of adjustments. Wesleyan does get the bump up ahead of Franciscan. They Wesleyan's a 1-0 against Franciscan this season. The only tricky spot was Richmond and Rochester. So Rochester has the head-to-head over Richmond this season. But if you swap them in the standing, so this is by their rankings here in the seeding. If you swap them, then you end up getting Elon and Richmond together in the same pool. And I looked at this a bunch of different ways to see if I could make switches in other ways, but nothing really solved the problem. And I simply don't want to have regional rematches at D3 Nationals. USAU doesn't explicitly say they don't do this, but in practice, they basically never do it unless they're forced to. So I just left it as is. Richmond is the higher ranked team by about 30 points. And it just didn't feel significant enough to make swaps anywhere else. So that's what I stuck with.
And you generally want to push the swaps further down as opposed to swapping like Middlebury somewhere in there. You want to preserve the top seeds their position. But yeah, I think that swap makes sense. I could see them just leaving it as is, but I think they're more likely to make swaps in the D3 tournament where there are fewer teams. And so playing a regional opponent represents a larger portion of your games. And they know that teams already don't get a lot of chances to see teams from other parts of the country. So I think they justifiably try and avoid regional rematches. I think that's appropriate in
Yes,
a division where the seedings and the rankings have a lot less data to inform them. So you
absolutely.
have more liberty to move away from them.
The only other thing I'll note is that Whitman was the fifth ranked team. I bumped them to the 3 seed because they won regionals over Lewis and Clark. In theory, you could push Middlebury up and just punish Lewis and Clark, but it felt a little too generous to Middlebury to push them all the way to the 3 seed. Whether they're the 4 or the 5 is not super relevant because it ends up being the same matchup. But that could go another way. They could decide to do it differently, but I think you have to reward the regionals win for Whitman here.
Makes sense to me.
All right, women's division. Keith, number 1 seed Wesleyan is my projection. I have Wesleyan with the 2-0 record against Haverford, the top ranked team, giving them the easy number 1 seed. So Keith, don't blow it, man.
I honestly was surprised when the projections came out because I expected us to be somewhere in like the 3 to 6 range. I knew that Haverford would be. I expected them to be probably the 1, and if we had gotten to the 2, I knew we were obviously heads up 2-0 against them. I don't think that's reflective of our relationship between Haverford. I mean, we played them when they were missing Zoe Costanza, so the rankings don't account for that. And I don't expect USA Ultimate to either. Obviously, this would be a great outcome for us. I totally see how you arrived at that. I think if we do end up number 2 when the official rankings come out, I would expect the same change from USA Ultimate.
Otherwise, this is almost straight rankings. Davenport gets the nudge up to the 8 seed over the higher ranked Rochester to deal with a regional rematch situation between Wesleyan and Rochester. And then the Puget Sound swapped ahead of Rice at the 14 and 15 spots. Same situation, avoiding the regional rematch between Puget Sound and Lewis and Clark.
Comment
So
in
we'll
the
see.
chat from Willow Way says St. Olaf beat Carleton at regionals, so there's no way that they'll stay at 7. What do you think?
Interesting. A fair point. This is a spot where I tend to do what USAU does, which is lean pretty heavily on the rankings. So Olaf is the seventh ranked team. Carleton is the 3rd ranked team, and Carleton is about 100 points in front of Olaf. These tend to be the spots where USAU just goes rankings. We already accounted for the upset in the algorithm with extra weight due to it being regionals, so we're going to stick with that. Now, given that it's D3, I can definitely see the case to bump Olaf all the way up into a 1 seed over Carleton, but I also won't be surprised if this is what they do because this is historically what they do. This is the reason they got rid of the regional requirements to go in order of regionals finish, because it felt like they were, if there's an upset at regionals, that they don't overweight it just because of a one game result. So I can see it going both ways. I think the margin of victory over Carleton, it's already accounted for in the algo. It's a great question,
And
though.
I think this is stuff that a lot of people don't really have the full ins and outs of, and that's something that you've been paying a lot of attention to over the years. So it's good to get those thoughts out there.
Let's see. I'm just taking a quick look at the chat. Willoway continues to say that Haverford and Wesleyan are the clear number 1 and 2. Both beat Olaf, who beat Carleton, who beat Whitman. And Carleton almost lost to Michigan Tech at regionals. I mean, again, that stuff is all baked in. USU is not going like region by region, looking at the like score margins of individual games. They're just not doing that. They're accounting on the algorithm, taking all of that into consideration. It's why you do it. All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about the top 25 players in Division 1 College Ultimate. And we're going to play some semi-pros small balls. Stay with us. Be right back. You know what to do, folks. Like and subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, time to jump on the train. Join more than 221,000 subscribers to the Ultiworld YouTube channel. And make sure that you hit that thumbs up as well. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, 5-star review, please. We appreciate it. Keith, let's talk about the top 25 players in the country in the college division. And I guess we want to start with the top 10. Where do you want to begin here?
Yeah, let's start at the top, because I think that's what people want to know the most about. Followed shortly by, did my teammate get
Who got snubbed? Is my friend on
Yeah.
the list? Am I on the list? All right, so top 10. Let's start on the women's side and take a look at the top 10 right now. Mika Kurahashi coming in as the top ranked player on the ballots. She was only third in the participant rankings, so that's college players, and she was fourth in the subscriber rankings. But the Ultiworld experts almost unanimously giving her number 1 spot. Edward Stevens zigged and gave her the 2 spot with Shigal Gelfand at number 1.
No way, Edward. Edward bucked the trend. Color me shocked.
So Keith, your ballot's right there. You've got Mika at number 1. Why'd you land there?
Well, to me, it was a 2-horse race. It was Mika Kurahashi and Chloe Phillips. To me, they were the clear 1-2, and that tended to play out across almost every ballot, more or less, and are why they ended up where they were. And to me, it is close. But Mika's just been playing so well as of late. Is really a total package player. You know, maybe not maybe Khalil, you'd feel a little bit better about centering the disc to Khalil and asking her to run a possession from the backfield than you would Mika. But Mika's so good at her strengths, at being a dominant deep threat, and then has become so good at playing small ball as well, and using that kind of speed in the red zone and in give and goes. It reminds me a little bit of Tyler DiGirolamo. And, you know, he was somebody who was like considered widely just mostly a deep threat. And then you start to see him turn his game into like, oh, I can just use that speed in the short space and the size that I have and just body people out and win that way. And Mika is so quick and so fluid. It's just really hard to guard her in small spaces.
Well said, Keith. I'm right there with you. I've got her at number one. I didn't get my ballot in on time, so I'm not included in this list. But look, she's been a top 5 player in college for like 3 years. So it's no surprise to see a veteran presence like her on the number one team in the country. I will note. I said in the country. Someone just texted me and was like, "Hello, in the country, in the division, in the division.
In
I'll
the
do my
country,
best."
it's parlance.
Yeah, it's right. But people are going to be pedantic about it. Um, I just think it's like no surprise, right? Best player, best team, and I just think that she's a little bit more consistent as a player compared to Cleo, who's great, but also can tend to be a little bit of a turnover machine at times.
Yeah, but to me, there
It's a
are
role
both in
thing.
the same tier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like if you're asking somebody to go out there and like win you a game, like I feel like they're well above everybody else on the list at the moment.
Yeah, they're A1 and A2 uh unless you're Edward Stevens, basically. Although there were the only other person who got from the staff a top 2 spot, and I guess really the subscribers also had Trout Waybright, but Shigal Gelfin got the top spot from the subscriber brackets, ballots, and the participant ballots, which is players and coaches, as well as Edward Stevens and a 2 spot from Kiana and Scott Dunham. So, Shigal Gelfand, I think it ended up finishing all the way at 5 in total, but one of the few players who has that ceiling that people are seeing as being one of the best 1 to 3 players in the division.
Let's take a look at the top 10 on the men's side. And number one overall on the list is Ben Dameron. He narrowly, very narrowly edges out Tobias Brooks. Really was very close at the top just in general. Like, look at the ranking points differentials here. They are not wide. Mike Glass at 3, Dexter Clyburn, Anton Oram at 4 and 5. So this is one where Keith, your ballot is not posted like in this screenshot, but you have Dameron at number one and Brooks at number 2. I go the other way. I think Brooks is the best player in college right now. I have Dameron at the 2. And it's interesting because, Dameron was a finalist for the World Games team and Brooks was not there. Uh, the thing is, I just feel like the impact on the season so far, like if I want a guy to go out and win me a game right now, I don't know how you don't take Brooks.
Well, the only way that you don't take Brooks is because you have the choice for Ben Dameron, in my opinion. uh, Look, I know they won the head-to-head. Obviously, it's a bit silly to pin that on a one-on-one matchup. Uh, the fact is, we're talking about who can lead their team to a title, and we've seen Ben Dameron do it. And there's just a longer track record, in my opinion. More experienced, more developed player, and has proven it more to me. I think if you asked me like who I thought was going to play the best, like literally at this very second, you can flip a coin between the two in my mind. But if I had to project out, and this is what I do for this exercise, I'm going to take the person with the longer track record, even if they're both playing. If they're both playing at a 10 right now, I'll take the guy who's been playing at a 10 for 2 or 3 years over the guy who's played it for 1 or 2 years. That ultimately was the decision making point for me. I do think that Toby is still a bit profligate with the disc. You know, although I know it looks great to throw all those no look highlights, but nobody posts it when you throw a no look pass that doesn't get completed. You know, I still think he's a little gung ho, but it's not like Dameron never turns it over. He's not an efficiency machine. They're both tremendous defenders, both really scary downfield. Uh, Toby's probably a little bit faster, but they are to me that they should have been the clear 1 and 2, and they mostly were. There were a couple other players who got 1 and 2 votes, but yeah, the cutoff really. You mentioned the close margins. Yeah, there's a little bit of separation as you move down that top 7, but it's not until you get to 7 until the number really drops off.
Yeah, like Dameron's probably the better two-way player. Is that like if you're looking for a tiebreaker, it would be a good reason to just be like, I feel like the defense from him is a little bit better. Uh, he's also playing on a more system-y team, whereas Brooks has like mega green light to kind of just do whatever. The thing is, like Brooks is hitting the shots, right? He was a big part of the reason that they beat UNC at Easterns. TBD what happens at Nationals. I just feel like the ceiling offensively right now for Brooks is just in the stratosphere. I mean, he has been so good this season as a thrower and is just a facilitator of the offense. And that doesn't mean that I think that, he's clearly going to be the better player than Dameron at Nationals, because I think those guys are really close. And frankly, we saw Mike Glass could do last college Nationals, how well he played for Rhino at Club Nationals. Any of these guys up near the top could have a monster Nationals and look like the best player. But Brooks, for me, having the best season so far, I feel like that's the tiebreaker in my mind.
Understandable. I can't say that I fault somebody for putting Brooks at 1.
Josh Katz wants to get Edward on here to defend the Ben Dameron ranking at 7th. Says it's criminal. It's a classic Edward move to put a player who is obviously incredibly good too low on the list. Edward Stevens, number 1 Jack Williams hater.
Out of 13, I believe. But I think part of what leads Edward to not being afraid to go away from consensus is I think he really looks at immediacy. He's like, what have you been doing for me lately? And I'm way more the opposite way. I want to see track record. I want as much data as I can get to. But Edward is very much like, what have I seen from you this season? I'm not really even thinking about most of the other stuff.
And I think that's fair criteria. I'll quote Edward from the article, which is available.
Yeah, if you're
full, including
you can read it in the article.
Yep. As a subscriber, you get access to the write-up from the Ultra Road Reporters and the full top 25. I guess we go all the way to 35, right? You can see pretty deep down the list. So Edward says, we have seen Dameron be the guy, but we aren't seeing it this season. And I always view this exercise as a this season exercise. I feel like we bring this up every year. I was roundly mocked for having Dina Elamelek over Jack Burju in 2019, which I based on that exact same reasoning. Look how it turned out. So he's reaching back 6 years to come up with some justification. But anyway, he's not afraid to zig and zag. And he's from Athens, and he's got Aiden Downey at 20th. So he's way out of line with that too.
Yeah, the chat says Sam Grossberg snubbed from the top 10, or just he was getting votes. He actually ended up finishing 26th, so he just missed the top 25 very narrowly. Although I still don't. I feel like the Sam Grossberg hype has overshadowed how good Adam Grossberg is, who did make the list at 20. I know Sam Grossberg got a lot of excitement going from the club season and HSNI and all that kind of stuff, but like Adam's really good.
Notably, the participants have Sam Grossberg at 25. Adam Grossberg did not make their list. Look, I think Sam's probably the rookie of the year for me. And, I guess Nationals could change that, but I don't think it's like crazy not to have him on here, but I think he would make my top 25 if I was making a full list in the 20s somewhere.
Yeah, I probably was lower on him than most people than Sam Grossberg. Like I did honestly didn't make my top 35.
You're just wrong. I'm sorry, you're just wrong. He's nasty.
Yeah, you can be nasty and not be in the top 35. There are good players.
Notably,
who didn't make my list.
Georgia Tech dropped a Sam Grossberg Rookie of the Year highlight drop video today.
I know. I love that. I love that. I need more of that.
I love it too.
I also like that they're making his case because he won't be at Nationals, because you got to do it. Like,
yep,
it's hard. You are at a disadvantage trying to win these awards when you're not at Nationals. And this is a really strong rookie class. You might be seeing you're talking about having Colorado as the 1 seed. Elliot Hawkins might be out there tearing it up while his team wins a national championship, and then you're gonna have to compare that to Sam Grossberg and the 0 he turns in for his nationals grade. Look, I don't. We can litigate this at the end of the year. We'll talk about rookie of the year. But if you stop the season right now, I think I'd probably have Sam Grossberg as my rookie of the year. But do you got to look at Nate Morgan and Elliot Hawkins? It's going to be a really competitive year.
It is going to be. It is going to be. But I have him as the front runner going into nationals, and it's going to take a big performance from one of those other guys to surpass him. I mean, it's not his fault that he's coming into a team that isn't quite ready to go to nationals yet. Like, if I'm picking a rookie out of the pool to put onto my team, I'm taking him. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We still got nationals to come.
The rankings are about looking forward and about projecting what you think a player could do for you in pursuit of a national championship for kind of like an average elite level team. Like if you just took all the top teams and average them out, like where would this player fit? As opposed to when we look at their awards, that's about what you did this season. How much did you contribute this season? So different conversations.
Notably, some of these players are going to be eligible for our draft. We're going to be drafting graduating college players to the pros, assuming that there was such a thing. Yeah. So, there's always going to be the caveat that some of these players may end up taking a 5th or 6th year. We don't know that. Some of this is going to be a little bit speculative on like who's actually eligible, but we're going to have our list. We're going to do our draft of, just assume a regular best player available type of draft. We're not going to go deep into every team's needs. And so that'll be for our subscribers live in the Discord right after this podcast. So go to ultiworld.com/subscribe, sign up now, lock yourself into an all access subscription, get all of the bonus deep look content, all the articles, and watch all of D3 and D1 Nationals in full. And you can do that all right now, starting here in May. It's a perfect time to subscribe. Semi-pro small ball. Before we get to the mailbag question of the week, let's take a look at the Week 7 Western Ultimate League results. Playoff picture crystallizing in the Western Ultimate League, Keith. And so your Week 7 scores, Utah gets a win over Arizona. Arizona, the bottom feeder this year out there, 22-15 final score. Seattle over the Bay, 11-10. And then the Bay over Oregon, 11-9.
The Bay Seattle game is the one to talk about. Although there's low scores in those two games. I think that the Bay Area game against Oregon was not as close, and Oregon kind of made a late push. But that Seattle game, the Bay had them. The Bay was up. It was a very close back and forth game. Not a lot of separation, as you can imagine, with a low score. I think the Falcons were up like maybe 8-6 late in the second half. Or not late in the second half, but in the second half. Inefficient game, but wow, teams. You should go and watch the last third of that game if you are into people getting roofed, because basically every possession ends with a huck, and about 50% of those end with somebody getting roofed. They don't always score after the roofing, but I mean, there was, I'm trying to remember all the guys. Like Sarah Carnahan had one, and there was one from Amanda Maru, and then who was it? There was a player on Seattle who like caught it over 3 people. It was crazy. Crazy ending. And the Bay had their chance. They let Seattle get back in front with a couple of late breaks on these long back and forth points with all the hucks. And the Bay had the disc late, but couldn't close it out. And then, had to do the thing where they scored to make it 1 and gave the disc to Seattle with 20 seconds left. And you're in desperation mode trying to take the disc from them. But Seattle able to hold on. And I think at this point, it's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which we don't end up with the Colorado, San Diego, Seattle, Bay Area championship weekend, right? Like that
I don't think it's possible.
Yeah.
It
feels like
we're
we're
only playing
basically
6 games. It's
right.
Utah, Oregon, and Arizona all have 4+ losses, and the Bay is 3-2. So it's done deal. It's just about seeding at this
point. Yeah, the Bay only has 1 game left.
Yep. Colorado and San Diego will play in the last week of the season on the May 18th, and that will likely decide the 1 seed. So I guess the question is, is it Do you think it's a big value to get the 1 seed and play the Bay in the semis?
I would say yes, except right that this is you're not in the altitude. The Bay is playing at home, so they may get the extra juice for home field advantage, right? And maybe that puts them on equal footing with the three teams I think have clearly been stronger through the season, although not by much. The Bay's been competitive. I think you got to think as San Diego and Colorado as the front runners right now, but Seattle and the Bay are perfectly capable of getting the wins. So I don't think it matters a ton which order you're going to end up facing those teams.
Kind of a gentle schedule for the Bay. They got Oregon twice, Seattle twice, Utah once, Arizona once. So they get 4 of their games against the bottom teams in the league. And their 2 games against Seattle, both losses. Now, those were close games, but they never had to face Colorado or San Diego. You are right. Home field advantage matters. I still think they're clearly the bottom of this 4 pack that's going to be in the playoffs. So I think Colorado and San Diego are going to be very, very happy to win that game at the end of the regular season and get the Bay in semis. All right, let's move on. PUL. Excuse me. DC Shadow over LA, 21-13. And the Gridlock go 2-0 this weekend. Big wins over Milwaukee and Minnesota and out on the road. So Gridlock continuing to look really strong, Keith.
Yeah, and credit to DC also, traveling to LA, which is not obviously going to be easy, but doing so with a pretty short roster, not unlike Raleigh, and without some of the big names that are on this DC team, they still went out and got a huge win. Like it, not close. I think that's a really good sign for where DC is at right now. To be able to win with a short roster and missing some of the big stars on the team is a great credit to DC. And you can say some of the same about New York. We talked about them getting the win over Raleigh, missing some of their top players. I mean, I think you're really seeing these two teams feel like they're the favorites. They came into the season that way, but I think the regular season has mostly just backed all that up.
Should note that the Torch also defeated the Nightshade 12-4. Just didn't have the Insta graphic for it. So Nightshade struggling. Been a tough season.
Hey, they I don't know. I don't think they've scored double-digit points in total this season.
It's not good. Let's go to UFA week 2. It was a thunderstormy week with some games getting clipped or even fully postponed. Probably most notable results, Oakland goes on the road and gets the win over Seattle. That's an important one. And they still look like the top team in the West for the moment. Toronto gives DC a scare, but can't get the win at DC. And I think, again, Philly, 3-goal win against Toronto. Now, to be fair, it was back-to-back for Toronto, but I don't think a lot of people had Philly starting the season with wins over DC and Toronto in the East.
Charlie leading with the Spiders showing his Oakland favoritism.
I was going from the top to the bottom of the graphic.
Look, Philly, what is happening? I think that I expected this Philly team to be worse than last year, and they come out and yes, they caught Toronto on the back end of a back-to-back, a team with a ton of new people. They're like basically a new team. So play their first 2 games. Caveat. They beat them by 3. They've beaten DC and Toronto to open the year. Are the Hoppers for real, Charlie? Are they winning the league this year? Are you buying in on Philly?
I'm
Scott Heyman MVP. Sean Mott, all of league.
Since Sam Grossberg is back in the fold, I'm all in.
There it is.
I don't know. Like, I think that Philly has been pretty good. I think that their win over DC feels like a bigger deal than this, second game of a back-to-back win over a Toronto team that was really, really bad last season and is still maybe finding their footing. Um, I also don't think Toronto was at full strength this weekend. So, listen, at the end of the day, Philly has these wins banked. Toronto's 0-2. Philly is now in position to be looking for one of those playoff spots. Will they get there by the end of the season? I would still probably bet no, but I don't think that it's out of the question. They're pretty good. And if they miss the playoffs, it'll be by not much.
So I saw Nate Little get a nasty block in the highlight reels as well. I mean, I came in as a Philly hater. I was ready for them to disappoint this season, and they have started as well as basically they possibly can. And you're right. These are key wins with teams that they're going to be in the mix with. Especially DC has not looked very convincing. If and we don't know what to make of New York yet after the way that they play on the road. So it feels like Boston is in the front row right now for the East, and after that, Philly could very much be going up against Toronto and DC for that postseason spot, and they have head-to-heads right there. So
we got to see some more. We got to see Toronto at home. We got to see how Philly plays against Boston and New York. Yeah, of course.
Toronto is going to iron things out. The talent is still crazy. The reason everybody got hyped on them is very legitimate. What do you know what they're doing with the Atlanta Carolina game? Atlanta, they got postponed, but Atlanta was up like 1. It was Alex Rubin, our reporter, said it was the best game of the week, and it's unfortunate that it got canceled. I don't know. Maybe stealing that title from Oakland and Seattle, but
I don't know how they're going to handle that. It says Evans write-up says the game still isn't over, so maybe they're going to pick back up from where they left off. Do you scrub the game clean and start new? I actually don't know what the rules say about this.
Producer Lindsay Sue is saying that they're going to finish the game at the next Atlanta game. So I guess they will finish the first game and then play the second game.
There you go. And then the Madison Houston game was they got through halftime. So the game is final, 12-10, but they basically didn't play the second half. Thunderstorms.
Tough scene. Get it all out of the way for D3 and D1 Nationals. Y'all take all the juju.
We don't need any of that energy in Burlington.
No.
It's time for our mailbag question of the week. What do we got, Keith?
This one comes in from Calvin. And following on, maybe you could tag this in a semi-pro small ball. If Ultimate was a truly a pro sport, how many games are teams ideally playing? You and I are big NBA fans. We all know the NBA season is way too long. I don't know what baseball fans think about their endless summer of 700 million games. What do you think would be the right length of season for Pro Ultimate?
It feels like it's not as short as it is now. They're playing fewer games than NFL teams, and the NFL is a brutal, violent game that requires, in some cases, more than a week to recover. Ultimate, it's physical, but it's a lot closer to basketball than it is to football. I would say how many teams are in each division? There's 6. You want to play 2 home, 2 away against everybody in your conference? How many that gets you to 10 games, right? So then you want to play at least a few out of division games. No, 2 home, 2 away is 20 games.
Gets you to 10 if you
right. It gets you to 20. Because a home and away is 10.
2 home and 2 away. Yes.
2 home, 2 away is 20. Plus, let's call another 8 games out of conference. So maybe 25-ish games. I'm spitballing a little bit here. Maybe you want to make it around 30. but it would be more like 2 to 3 games a week rather than 1 game a week.
I mean, I get what you're saying about versus football, but I do think that one of the things that you see in the NFL is that every game matters so much, and I guess in college football as well. And you start to devalue that the more you extend out the season, and so there's something attractive about that, about getting down sub 20 games where it's like when you mess up, it matters. It adds so much weight to your regular season. Uh, and in theory, in this world where it's truly a pro sport, we don't have to worry about teams sending these skeleton crews on the road, or there's a big, worlds or club tournament that's going to sap away the talent or whatever. I think we get to erase some of that stuff. So, uh, maybe more of a shorter sprint season would be more dramatic and fun.
Listen, I think, there is something nice about having to only kind of like pay attention for 1 or 2 days a week. The NFL has slowly pushed that out to 4 days a week now? Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Thursday, Sunday, Monday through most of the year. Um, so I get that, but I just think that the game shouldn't be treated quite with the same like space between games as the NFL. Like it's closer to baseball in that like you would want it to, if it's an actual pro sport, right? People are coming out because it's like a summer game and you're playing in the warm weather and people are having a beer and a box of popcorn and the team's playing, 10, 12 home games instead of right now they're playing 6. I just don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough home games. I think if it was a real pro sport, they would want more revenue and they would be playing more games because it's physically
That's
possible.
true.
Now, I don't want them to play 80 games like in the NBA. It's insane. But somewhere between like a very, very limited schedule and a mega season like the NBA is the right amount for me. It also just means the best teams
You don't
definitely
want to
make the
get out the
playoffs.
NBA. Like, yeah, yeah, maybe something with like a midseason tournament would help. We can get a little of that Champions Cup middle.
Yeah. All right. Benji Reese says the other way to make sure games matter is to not have a postseason, as un-American as that is. Well, spoken like a true Brit. It could make sense to have it be more of like a Champions League type format, but then you would need teams to play all over the country. But I guess if it's a full pro sport, then that would be totally fine. You would see that,
Well,
right?
I want to push back against what Benji's saying. The other way to make games matter is to have no postseason. But now you're just taking away games that matter to make other games matter because postseason games do matter. So like now you're cutting off games that do matter to make other games matter rather than like compressing games that don't matter to make the games matter. It's different.
Some games have to matter. We can all agree on that. Join us for our sub bonus. We're drafting graduating college players into the pros. So who's going to go number 1 overall? We will find out. We'll be live in the Discord in just a few minutes. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. Just a couple weeks to college nationals. Streaming schedules coming soon once we get the official pools. Talk to you next week.